the Uniprint Infinity printing solution. We know that printer management can be a challenge for many of the hospitals that we talk to, especially in a virtual environment. And based on your survey responses, thank you for all of you who filled that out, it does look like it's a challenge for many of you on the line as well. So we hope that today's webinar provides you some valuable information as you look to solve those challenges. My name's Audrey, and I'm a Business Development Manager here at Forward Advantage, and I'll be the moderator of today's webinar. Our speaker today is Lee Howard, our VP of Client Services at Forward Advantage, and we'll also be joined by Mike Kniebel, VP of Sales and Business Development at Forward Advantage, to give us an introduction to the solution. There's a lot of people on the line, so we've gone ahead and muted your phones, but if you do have a question, just enter it in the question panel that you see on your screen, and we'll do our best at the end to answer all of those questions. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mike.
Thank you, Audrey. As Audrey mentioned, this is Mike Kniebel. I'm the Vice President of Sales for Forward Advantage, and I just wanted to kick the session off by giving you just a brief overview of how we got into the business of offering the Uniprint Infinity solution. As many of you are aware, Forward Advantage has been working in the virtual desktop infrastructure space for a number of years with our hospital customers, and over the years, we have noticed an increasing instance of challenges around print management, including printer driver management, dealing with applications that may not have location awareness, and in many instances when folks are moving from one desktop to another, that location awareness and printing are on a bit of a collision course. And then as time has gone by, also secure printing. So as we frequently do at Forward Advantage, when we see a recurrence of a particular issue for our customers, we look for a solution to that challenge, and sometimes that might be developing our own technology, our own intellectual property, or it may come in the form of a technology partnership, as it did in this particular instance. And really the reason for that is when we went out and started looking at the available technologies in the market, we came to the conclusion that Uniprint, with their Infinity solution, offered the most complete and mature technology for handling the issues that are facing our customers around print management. So we went ahead and partnered with Uniprint and have had a very successful partnership with them thus far, and we are very pleased to be talking about their Infinity solution today. At this point, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Lee Howard, who will take you through the bulk of the presentation and demonstration, and then we'll come back around afterwards. So Lee, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lee Howard of Forward Advantage. Some of you on the line I already know, and others I do not, so welcome. And I'm going to walk us through some slides about the Uniprint Infinity solution, as well as some demonstration, talking about what challenges we see and what customers are doing with the solution today. So an overview of our agenda for today is we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we see, probably some of the ones that you are seeing in your own healthcare facility today. Talk a little bit about how the solution is architected, and as well as components of the solution. And then probably most importantly, we're actually going to demonstrate and work inside the solution a little bit to give you a feel of what the Uniprint Infinity solution looks like, and try to tie back what some of those improvements and benefits that we see to our customer base are by looking at the product itself, hopefully tying it all together for you. So as Mike mentioned, as we started to work into identity and access management and into virtual desktops, we started to come across printing solutions or printing problems as being an issue in healthcare. And really three areas that we see printing to be a problem in the typical hospital or hospital and its associated clinics. First and foremost, printer management, managing all those printer drivers on your workstations, on your Citrix servers, on your virtual desktops, printer drivers to match the printers that are located everywhere throughout your facility. Even with the advent of the electronic medical record, we still have quite a bit of printing and printers out there in the hospital. Second is the user and their roaming experience and dealing with a virtual desktop or virtual published applications, whether it's coming through VMware View, Citrix Zen Desktop for the desktop side of things, or Citrix Zen App for published applications, or an actual Zen App published desktop. On top of delivering that virtual desktop, we're dealing with endpoints that are no longer Windows-based PCs. We do see thin clients, zero clients, and how do we deal with printing from those locations, since some of those environments have no operating system, have a Linux or a non-Windows operating system. How do we tell the virtual desktop where the person is located? So where do we want that print job to go? And really managing that workflow for the default printer. And probably most importantly for everybody on this call today is how do we manage that Meditech foreground printing for client server 5.x and the 6.x platforms. And we'll talk about that, and we'll actually look at that as we demonstrate today. And the last challenge that is kind of something that customers are moving towards is concern about that patient health information, because when we print documents, they typically have patient names, medical record numbers, and what happens to that printed document when the nurse prints from her mobile cart and does not go and pick it up. So there is a feature within Uniprint called Secure Pull Printing. You'll hear me refer to it as a VPAD or the VP hold queue, but there is secure pull printing inside the solution. So we figure with that we've rounded out the solution about what most customers are struggling with. So what is Uniprint? Uniprint Infinity is a PDF-based solution with a universal print driver, again, eliminating the need to have the printer drivers installed on the endpoints or within the virtual desktops, Citrix, VMware. It allows us to manage that print solution on a unified platform or a server. You'll hear me talk about the bridge server in a moment here. It enables us to do pull printing so that we don't actually have to have the print job end up on an unmanned, unattended printer. Hopefully simplifying our print management process, what it takes to get a printer on and routed, and reducing some of the cost of that management and maintenance. And if people aren't picking up their print jobs or somebody else is picking it up and putting it in the shredder, reduction in some of that paper and ink. So Uniprint Infinity fits into our customer environments using this graphic here. On the left-hand side, and I'm going to walk through this left to right, and again, when I demonstrate and I show you the product, you'll be able to hopefully tie some of these pieces together. So the Windows server or the application servers, print jobs can come from application servers, they can come from Citrix servers or virtual desktops. And with Uniprint, we actually are printing to what we refer to as the bridge server. The bridge server is the traffic cop of the environment because it is going to understand the printer that I want to send the document to, and it's therefore going to route it from the bridge server, and we'll look at that as we demonstrate. But importantly, that document is being rendered and sent as a PDF. We're compressing the PDF so we don't have as much traffic, and again, reduction of the driver. And then from the bridge server, we're sending it on to a print server that has some of the Uniprint console components on it so that we can manage that print job to its ultimate destination of a printer. In another slide, I'll show you where the secure pull printing and the hold queue comes into place. The print server, when they receive the job, has the ability to obviously print it to the appropriate driver with the appropriate margins and some advanced features that we'll talk about here in a second. It's ideal when we're printing from a zero client or thin client because we know what the name of that zero client or thin client is, or Windows endpoint, and therefore know where the user is located, which is very important if we have shared printers between a med-surg and an ICU, or a med-surg that's split into an A and B side, as an example. We're also printing through the RDP, ICA, or PC over IP channels. So on the bridge server, what we'll begin to see is the Printpal component of Uniprint. It allows us to associate printers with computers. It also has us the ability to associate specific printers with users or groups of users. There are a couple workflows that we'll look at when we're actually demonstrating, but one example is that prescriptions are typically not printed by nurses. They're printed by the physician when he or she discharges the patient, and we have discharge orders that need to go to that special drawer on the printer. This is one way of achieving it through Active Directory groups or users in Printpal. We're also trying to ensure that we're correctly mapping the printers to the location and the print queues for Uniprint to follow instead of just letting Windows do its thing. So in healthcare, we do print plain old laser print jobs, but we also print a lot of labels. We have some needs for some custom printing when it comes to color drawer or black and white drawer, stapling and hole punching. Uniprint has a solution for this. So when we're actually sending the job from the bridge server, to the print server, we can set up basics about that print job in the printer on the bridge server, and we can also extend those properties on the print server so we know what type of document and what drawer we want to print using those unique components. Again, one central place to manage it and maintain it, trying to take the user out of the equation. So we looked at a similar graphic and a similar workflow for traditional printing where we're sending the print job directly to the printer. With Uniprint, we also have secure pull printing, and the process is very, very similar. As you can see there, the job is printed either from the application server or the desktop of the user. It goes to the bridge server, and at that point, we know that this print job is destined for the Uniprint queue, and therefore you see the big red stop sign because we're going to stop the print job, leave it on the bridge server, and wait for the user to identify themselves at whatever location they want to. The VPad, the Uniprint VPad, has integrated security. It can work with a PIN for the user to release their job. Additionally, at the bottom, you can see that it also has the ability to associate with your badging system, whether it's an HID badge or an RFID component. So the user can tap on the VPad to select their print jobs. The VPad is a network-based appliance, so it's independent of the printer. So we can have one VPad for 2 or 3 printers that are in a specific area. Workflow example for that is if I'm in a med-surg unit, I tapped on the VPad, I want to send the labels for the lab draw that was just completed by the phlebotomist to the label printer, as well as I want to send my discharge summary to the laser. It's hard for me to say phlebotomist, I guess. It's okay to laugh in a webinar. And everybody else on the phone is probably laughing at me. So a couple other components of the VPad, and you'll see me demonstrate this as well today, allows for that pull printing. We do see often as we deploy VPads that there are multiple jobs that the user will print that they will never collect. We do have the ability for those after a certain period of time to be deleted. The user can then print them later. So an example of this workflow is a physician is working remotely at his office. He wants to print a couple documents. He sends them to the Uniprint queue, and when he arrives at the hospital, he actually taps on the VPad and prints a job that he actually started while he was back in his office looking at the patient that he was going to go round on. Print jobs are released again by the VPad. The VPad controls that, and you can select the destination or have it automatically selected. Hopefully with a VPad, though, we are saving some of those duplicate prints because people didn't really mean to print it twice and throw away once. And I bet you everybody would raise their hand. That happens at my facility. So I'm going to transition here, and I'm going to actually transition to demonstration, and then I'll come back for a couple components with inside of workflow and benefits. So if you give me a moment, I will transition out of PowerPoint and into our demonstration system. So I'm going to reshare my screen, And now you see it. What I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to actually authenticate and pick up my virtual desktop. And when I pick up my virtual desktop, you're going to see the Uniprint agent inside the Windows tray. And I want to talk about that because as we talked about it knowing where I'm at and for that roaming printing, I wanted to show how we see that and how we understand that. So I'm going to authenticate. In a couple seconds, I'm going to pick up my virtual desktop. And you're going to see that I've already been working throughout the day. I have my lovely little notepad printer document up. But the important thing here is that the Uniprint agent is sitting in the tray. And what we can see here is it knows that what endpoint I'm connected to, Tahoe, and it knows what virtual desktop I'm using. It's important because we'll see in the Uniprint Bridge Server console that we know where the user is located based on the location of their endpoint. This happens to be a Windows endpoint, but it would work the same with my thin client, whether it's a Zero client, a Wise P25, or whether it's an iGel device or it's an HP thin client. The Uniprint agent knows who I am and where I am. Therefore, it can route the print job to where I am. So I'm going to hop out of here, and I'm going to attempt to do Alt-Control-Delete. Trying to move this out of the way. This one, dead air is not a good thing. Controls on it. Ah, it's right there. Sorry. There we go. Webinar dead space. So I'm actually on the Bridge server now. I apologize for that. And I'm going to open up the Uniprint console so we can talk a little bit more in detail about the components of that Bridge server and how it knows what to do when we tell it what we want. First and foremost, to hop through some of the console, we actually are going to add printers to the Uniprint Bridge server. These printers are from your print server, and what we're doing is we're associating them with a printer that the print server has the appropriate driver for, and we can also have 2 and 3 printers listed here for the appropriate drawer or detail components about that printer. An example of that is at Wilson Memorial Hospital, we actually segregate out a separate printer for black and white printing versus color printing, because the default drawer typically is to go to the color printing, and we want to have the default be black and white to save ourselves some toner. And so we actually will list that, and we'll drop that as the default. I mentioned some of the components about that and properties. On the Bridge server, we actually can get to some components about paper width, about sizing of things. On the print server is where we would provide all of those details about the drawers, as well as labels and hole punches. The Bridge server at least will give us a list and give us some primary controls. We need the printers here because as we hop into some of the other components within inside of Printpal, I'm going to start associating printers to locations. The second component that I did want to show is that secure pull printing is in the console where we can associate printers to those devices. I mentioned that it's an appliance. So I can associate the IP address that's on the MedSurg to the printers that are in MedSurg because I don't want them to tap their badge or type in their PIN and then select a printer that's a long ways away. That doesn't make any workflow sense. So again, configuration for those V-pads and their associated printers. The cornerstone really here is in Printpal. And what we see here is a demonstration setup where we actually can see that I've actually segregated out my second floor from my third floor in two different areas. You'll see that I can add machines or those endpoints and therefore have printers be associated with that machine. If I was to add another printer to that area, I could simply go to the printers list, which again you saw me hit in the primary printers, and I can drag and drop an additional printer and it would be associated with this area and all of its machines. I can right-click and make that the default printer. Again, when the user roams to that machine, the Uniprint agent knows that, hey, Lee's here over on the Sacramento machine versus being on the Tahoe machine. Therefore, make this his default Windows printer. Looking at my third floor setup, we're going to see a couple different things here. You see that I have two different workstations in there, but I also have a prescription drug doctors. I mentioned that as one of the workflow use cases that we do see out there. So physicians print to prescription paper in a specific drawer, and instead of associating that to all the computers so we see that, I'm only going to associate that to specific users. I do that through looking for users in my directory and then adding that object so that the specific printers only show up. First you have to change it. Only specific printers will then show up for that user. So again, a combination of the user and computer. The goal and the purpose here of this bridge server is to make it easier to manage the printers, associate the printers with the endpoints, and if need be, associate the specifics about drawers to users that have specific rights inside the profile of that printer. I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to switch over to a little bit of that secure pull printing so that you can see what that experience is on the user interface side of things. And everybody's wondering if there's going to be a big long pause again, but no, there is not. I have an emulator here for my VPAD. I'm going to wait for my virtual desktop to load. And earlier I actually did print some documents to my print queue. I wanted to show folks what it looks like to see the list of printers. I don't have a badge associated with this emulator that's running on the screen, but the VPAD does have a badge option. So I can simply enter my username and authenticate. And what you'll see here is you'll see a list of the jobs that I printed. I can either select one job, multiple jobs, I can remove them, I can just print them out to the printer that I want, and since I have rights to multiple different printers, I can select from whichever one I'm associated with or is near me. The laser, the label, the drug prescription paper printer, whatever I want to do, select it and off on its way. You'll notice that it automatically did remove it from my list because now I've printed it, it's gone. You can see in my list I had some things printed today, and as I scroll further down, you can see that I've printed some things in my queue from a little while ago, and after time, they will go away. What you see in the VPAD is the title of the document. If in the case that I printed from Internet Explorer, you saw that I was printing from MSN and Google. So the user has some indication of what type of document that they are based on what the print job is sending along the way. Multiple users can use this, so I'm going to switch my user. You saw that I had a longer list. Chris Bates has a shorter list of documents, but again, the documents in the print queue are associated with the user for the user to authenticate and deliver to the endpoint. security, and making sure the right user gets their documents, especially on demand versus them sitting there or sitting on the nursing station tray. I'll hop back to my bridge server before I try to summarize things. And I'm checking my time. The flexibility within the Uniprint bridge server allows us to do things in Windows. And in the beginning, I talked about Meditech client server and 6x foreground printing. We also have a component called a mapping utility, which is fairly similar to Printpal in the case that we actually have endpoint devices associated with a queue and therefore an actual location of a printer. In the Meditech 5.6 and the Meditech 6X, we actually send the print jobs to the Uniprint bridge server and let the Uniprint bridge server deliver them to the endpoint. This is done very similar to Printpal in that automated printing routing. And what we're doing is a combination of reducing the setup in Meditech to a laser printer and a label printer and sending that to the bridge server and letting the bridge server define the ultimate destination based on our mapping. This is a component that we've used at Meditech facilities like St. Joseph's Health System, Valley Presbyterian, so that we can get the right document delivered from Meditech above and beyond the Windows printing to the right printer. I'm going to try to do this, and it's going to make me switch screens. So to summarize the Uniprint Infinity printing solution, centralized print management, some of the workflow improvements and benefits that we see. Printpal allowing us to do dynamic routing and allowing for that roaming in that virtual environment, whether it's, again, Citrix or VMware or Windows Terminal Services. Optimize that printing for that VDI so that we know who and where the user is located, thin client, thick client. Secure pull printing from the VPad, allowing us to specifically configure in those printer properties on the bridge server and the print server the combinations of drawers, multiple hole punches, color versus black and white, different workflows to satisfy our different needs, and hopefully having some cost savings and reducing of wasted paper with the VPad specifically, as well as trying to eliminate and reduce printing on color, print on black and white, because it is obviously cheaper from a toner perspective. At this point, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Audrey Brislin, and she's going to give us kind of our next steps for some of the questions that may be coming in. If you do have one, as she mentioned, you can put that in through the chat, and I think we do have a couple coming in, so I'm going to hand it back to Audrey.
All right, thank you, Lee. I hope this session has given you all a better understanding of Uniprint and the benefits of implementing a print solution like Uniprint Infinity in your organization. As Mike mentioned before, please reach out to us with any questions, and we'll be happy to talk specifically about your needs. So you can contact your rep, and we'll also put some contact information up at the end. We have a few minutes for questions left, and we have quite a few. So we're going to do our best to get through all of them, and if your question doesn't get answered, we will follow up with an individual response within the next day or so. We'll also be following up with a link to this recording, so if any of your colleagues missed this presentation and you'd like to share it, we'll be sending you the link to the recording as well. So the first question, Lee, okay. Someone wants to know, is support for RFID cards built into the VPad, or is it an external connection of a card reader?
It's a good question. So the VPads actually come in three models. There's touchscreen, there's built-in RFID and HID, and so what we do is we typically look at what type of badge that you have and whether it's doing the PC Prox modality or a different one. We can also use external card readers, such as the RFID card readers, but the ones that we're seeing more deployed are the ones that are built in, and hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, a few people have wondered if the same badge readers that they use for their single sign-on will also work for this.
So yes, those are those RFID badges that I just mentioned. There can be RFIDs. There's also some rebranded ones out there. But it's the same type of badging technology, and so we're going to try to make sure we get either the same badge utilized or making sure we're using the same protocol for the VPAD as we are the badging to single sign-on in.
Okay, great. Does Uniprint support multi-tray printing in Citrix or RDS?
So yes, we actually looked a little bit of that inside of Printpal. The trays are actually what I'm going to configure over on the print server, where we have a Uniprint console installed there as well. And what you'll see published, as I kind of showed you a little bit of, is you'll see a different name for the different trays so that we can get the right job to the right tray and hopefully having the user not even know which tray they're going to. We're just going to automate that for them.
Okay. The next question, is there the possibility to clean print jobs that weren't picked up automatically every night?
Absolutely. So we actually will set that up hourly, daily, weekly. Usually it's more of a daily or weekly that we see out there. You saw in my setting, I actually have some quite old print jobs since we don't clean up our own stuff. But that's important so that we don't clean up our own stuff. It's important because people do print things that they never pick up. And so we want to make sure we clean that from their queue so they don't have to look through a long list. So daily, pretty typical.
Okay. And is that activity logged? Someone asked a question. Can you go back and identify which jobs were cleaned up?
Yes, we actually have, when people authenticate, we actually log that data in there.
Okay, great. Next question. Does the software support printers that are incompatible with Citrix?
Yes, we're compatible with about 99% of the printers in the market space because you can get some universal drivers out there. But again, the print job is going from the application server or endpoint client to the bridge server via PDF, and then we're rendering it from the print server down to the printer. So that's what our process through that. And again, we're rendering from the print server, so if we don't have a specific compatible driver, like a specific Sharp driver, then we can actually go to a universal driver from that.
All right. How does this work with the Citrix session printers?
So when using your UDP, we recommend disabling some of the Citrix session printers and utilizing the print driver for all session printing. The Citrix UDP will no longer be required really running with Uniprint.
Okay. The next question, there's a couple of questions about how the product is licensed. Mike, do you want to take that one?
So it's based on concurrent users. So when a user is authenticated to the system, it's utilizing a license at that time.
Correct. And Mike, to pull on that thread a little bit, it's when they're actually connected. So if Lee is not working and not connected, I do not consume a license. That license will be free on concurrency.
All right. One question is, can this help address some of the location awareness issues that we find in our Meditech system?
Absolutely. So what we tried to show up front was, again, foreground printing for Meditech client server and 6X, and we're using our printer mapping to do it very similar to what we saw in Printpal. So we're taking the print job in, knowing that the endpoint it's coming from to send it on to its destination. So again, our configuration in Meditech reduces a lot of printers out of Meditech to define it to really a laser printer, a label printer, and any custom printers we may have through Meditech, and then let that mapping on the bridge server do that for us.
Okay, great. I think that is about all we have time for today. I think we have some contact information up here. Mike, do you want to close this out?
Sure. I just wanted to thank everybody for their time. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that we recognize that in a webinar like this, we're giving a lot of general information about the functionality of the solution. If you have questions about your particular environment, perhaps it's about your particular printers, how you have things configured, this sort of thing, we'd love to get into a deeper discussion with you about your environment and even go through a demonstration that is a little bit more specific to the workflow that you're looking for. So please feel free to reach out to us. I'd encourage you to do so and have a conversation with Lee and his team. They can take you through a deeper dive and avail yourself of that information if you're experiencing any of the challenges that we've identified that are often felt in a virtual desktop environment. So other than that, though, I do want to thank you for your time.
All right, thank you to both of our presenters, and we will, as I mentioned, be sending out a follow-up email that will have a link to the recording of today's webinar, so you can share that out or just review it again for your own information.